The presence of the single story in America, social theories, and white privilege still marginalize ethnic minorities in the US, yet this court challenged such systems of domination by promoting a more comparative and empathetic story of the United States. Now that's kind of a mouthful, so I think we should pick it apart so I can explain each aspect of it so you can understand the whole better. Now, what is the single story of America? Well, we went over that in the first unit. That is when there's one version of history that we are taught, and it's history through one perspective, so that one perspective becomes the default image of the country we live in. And through that, we see one group of people, and they become the protagonists of the story of this country, America, so that they become the definition of American. And anyone who does not fit that image of that protagonist, in turn, feels left out and invalidated, and is seen as left out and invalidated unless they conform to the image. And we're able to see that through the fact that we tell the story through the white perspective. We hear how the white settlers won the West, but we don't hear how the Native Americans lost the West in turn. We hear how we bought Mexico from the Mexican government, when in reality we kind of, beat them in a war and then took it from them, and to not make it look as bad, we gave them some money for it. I'm saying we because I'm American and Mexican, but whatever. Through that, we see the dangers of the single story too, because it makes it so that you only have one image of what it is to be an American, when in reality America is it's a melting pot. It's the sum of all the people that live in it and make up its history. And we're able to see the danger of telling just one single story through the unit and the evidence given to us with Bury My Heart in Wounded Knee, wherein the American general population only sees the stories of the Native American struggles through the guise of newspapers and what the government tells us. We don't see what actually happens. And we can see it in one of the scenes where a newspaper reads that it's the massacre at Wounded Knee, when in reality it was a battle where the Native Americans were the ones defending themselves. Yet they're painted as the bad guys because they won, and it wouldn't fit the narrative of trying to drive that is supporting driving them off their land and into reservations. So the single story in this instance is self-serving and to the detriment of the Native Americans who were in the right in the situation. We see the same thing in the Freedom Riders documentary, because all we hear is that if we only look at the news releases and the reels and the speeches given by the politicians, that these people are instigators, when in reality they are following the letter of the law in taking these buses and mixing front and back and race, by having black people sit in the front and white people sit in the back and having them intermingle. There is no law against it, yet they are beaten and harassed for it and painted as instigators by merely doing it in a place where it's not welcome, despite it being wholeheartedly legal. And that creates a danger, because we never know if what we are being taught is what actually happened if there's only one perspective and we trust what we are told at face value without delving it and trying to get the perspective of the other people involved. And that can also mean that you grew up never hearing about these people, you can't identify with them, you have no role models. And then that leads into, and then the way that affects people, it leads into Unit 2, social theories. Now, the social theories are categoric knowing, which is where you have something happen to you, something bad, or something good, who knows, and then you immediately identify anyone with that key characteristic, and you prejudge them based on that characteristic and that past experience. So, let's say someone with a tattoo kicked me in the knee one day. And from then on, I see someone with a tattoo and I think, oh man, they're violent. They have a tattoo, they're gonna kick me or something, man. I just know it. That's categorical ignoring. That's basing a prejudgment off of past experience off a single or very small sample size of past experiences. And through that, we base a prejudgment on other people. And the only reason this is possible is through the second social theory we learned about, social distance. It reinforces it. It's when we separate ourselves from a group of people, or our upbringing or our society is built to separate us from them socially and through socialness. Idealistically, we don't get to know them. So it makes it easier to face prejudgment, to base a prejudgment off of them, because we don't have to know them and we don't get to know them because we don't want to know them. So we are satisfied with the prejudgments we have. And then through that, the distance grows. And then through that, because there is a distance and a prejudgment, it makes it much easier to swallow the third theory, social identity theory, wherein we are grouped apart and each giving a role in society based off prejudgments, with one subgroup or ethnicity usually standing above the rest. In this case, Caucasian Americans. Their social identity is that they are above everyone else, so they feel good because of that. While in the other ethnicities, it might be something similar, like, oh, we speak Spanish, so we feel better than they do because they only speak English. But the one that has the most power in this country is the social identity of Caucasian Americans, most likely. Yeah. And then we have the three theories of prejudice. We have scapegoating theory, wherein a subgroup of people, an ethnicity, a social class, is blamed for something that's not their fault because it is easy to blame them because they're the easiest scapegoats to have, which is also, we can also lead into exploitation theory, wherein a group is taken advantage of to the benefit of a group above them. We can see this with working class and the owning class, where the owning class takes advantage of the working class through their labor, but they use scapegoat theory, and these two usually go hand in hand, in order to explain why they are the haves and the haves not. I have the haves because I worked hard. You are the haves not because that group is taken away from you, because they are taking advantage of everything you've done, not because I'm taking your labor. And then we get into authoritarian personality theory. That is that is based on the fact that because someone is not like you, they are inferior to you. So I'm a Hispanic male. Anyone who's not a Hispanic male is inferior to me on the sole merit that they are not Hispanic and not male. They are weaker and they only speak one language. That's the prejudgment I have on them because of authoritarian theory. And finally, we have normative approach, wherein we do not fight prejudgments and we do not fight prejudices and racism because we have been conditioned to accept it and we take it as the norm. Now we're able to have a very good example of this in the film we watched, The Bronx Tale, and we're able to dissect each scene and apply these filters. But we also see it in A Class Divided, wherein a teacher creates false divisions in her class, separating them by eye color. And before, the class was more or less united. They liked each other, but as soon as she introduces ways to divide them and places one above the other, creates a social identity and therefore a social distance, the ruling social identity begins to belittle and harass the lower social identity. And they become the scapegoat them through all their problems. And at one point, they say, and then the teacher herself uses categoric knowing what it is to justify the way that the class is divided by saying, oh, he has brown eyes, his dad beats him, everybody with brown eyes has terrible parents. And through that categoric knowing, she's able to justify the social identity, and through that, by the social identity becoming accepted, she's able to create a distance that they themselves reinforce by believing they're better than themselves through authoritarian theory. And then that plays into, I'm going to skip Unit 3 because that comes later, that's important. That goes into Unit 4, and that's when we get into white privilege, we get into social allies, all of that stuff. And it explains how through the single story, we're able to create a sense of privilege. And the thing is, through the single story, the tools used to build that are the theories themselves as well. They reinforce each other in a way. You hear the single story, and that justifies your social identity. And through that social identity, because you are in that single story, you are the protagonist of this country, you are afforded certain abilities, well, not abilities, but privileges. You are never in question of being American if you are the definition of American. You are never in danger of being suspected if you are the very definition of what is normal. And we hear this, and then because you are normal, you are in authority, you are the system, your words automatically carry more weight. And we see this in the Tim Wise speech, wherein he explains how he is not speaking because he is the best at this. He is speaking because he happens to be white and know a lot about this. Therefore, his word carries more weight. And we are also able to see this through Audre Lorde's her paper, her writing on it, about how even within feminism it is divided into white feminism and people of color feminism, where the voice is usually that of white women, but and then they might, as an afterthought, get the voices of non-white women, and that leads into why we can't dismantle Master's house and Master's tools. The single story here being Master's house and the tools being the what is used to reinforce it. Well, the women were using the same tools that men use to disregard them and to stall them, to do the same, to say, it's not my fault I don't know about you, it's your job to teach me. And that leads back to Tim Wise's speech, where he says, you don't have to know because you don't know because you didn't have to know. So, maybe you should have known, but you didn't know because, well, I'm adding on to it, but they didn't know because they didn't want to or have to. But that creates problems in itself because it weakens the women's feminist movement, just like the way it makes us misunderstand the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. By only focusing on our version of the story, we don't get the whole picture. It creates a misunderstanding, and it ultimately weakens us. And that's where social allies come in, because social allies can help us break the single story because they can create empathy, and they can create a bridge through which we can talk to the people who might not be inclined to listen to us. These people who might not be inclined to listen to us would be more inclined to listen to someone who looks like them and acts like them, who knows our story and gives them a sense of understanding. Because through understanding, we gain empathy. We gain, not I understand you, but I feel you. They're able to get a perspective on the story of non-white people. And it all starts with listening to someone that is like them. And by listening to someone who is like them, and seeing that there are people like them who can fight, that it may reach something in them that might resonate and make them want to be like them as well. They work the same way the single story robs us of role models in history to look up to, and it robs them of role models to fight for something better. And I'm not saying that our history doesn't always have role models that are non-white, because that's called tokenism. It's when we uphold one person of a non-white group and use them as the singular example for why racism doesn't exist. Through that, it's a fallacy, and those fallacies are the same things that are used to uphold a single story. Through that, and then the reason I left out Unit 3 is because Unit 3 is when all the units come together. We have, like in the white Chicano movement, in the United Farmers movement, we have the different social the different social theories working against the farmers. They work on the field so we don't see them, so we don't care. But then through social allies like Robert Kennedy, who made them seen, they are able to be seen. They have their voices heard, and they are able to be legitimized by having the government recognize them eventually. And then that also ties into the single story, because we only ever see the story of the farmers on the news until they take to boycott in the streets. And then that also ties into white privilege, because the social allies like Robert Kennedy used their white privilege to get the farmers seen and subvert the single story. And by using these tools that we learned in the class, ourselves, we are able to see the filters of the social theories. And by identifying the theories, we're able to defy them, to look past them, to look past the lens, to take off the lenses we've been giving by identifying the lens. And we're able to subvert the single story, gain the perspectives we can get, recognize our own privileges in life, and maybe learn to be social allies by knowing what it is, by knowing that it is to take an interest, to know that we don't know and that they know, and to ask, please teach me so that I might know better, so that I can be of service to this injustice. That's how we subvert the single story, by being a social allies to people who we are not the group of, and subverting the single story so that we may gain multiple perspectives. And if we gain all the perspectives in history, then the single story becomes a story of everyone. Thank you.